And welcome. I'm Laura, co-CEO of accelerateHER, and I am so thrilled to welcome you to this session with the incredible Katrina Lake and one of my all-time favorite people, June Sarpong. They'll be talking leading with purpose and surviving and thriving in uncertain times. Katrina is someone who knows a thing or two about that. As the youngest woman to take a company public, in under 8 years, Stitchfix has grown from an idea to a company that's worth $3 billion, serving over 3 million clients in the US and the UK and employing 6,000 people. Katrina also serves on the board of fellow disruptors, Glossier and Grubhub, and is a mentor to many and a mother to 2 children. June has enjoyed a 20-year career, which has already seen her become one of the most recognizable faces on British television. She's co-founder of the We Network and author of Diversify, which argues the social, moral, and economic benefits of diversity. June is currently co-host of The Pledge, Sky News' flagship weekly political discussion show, and in November 2019, she became the first director of creative diversity for the BBC. June, delighted to hand over to you.
Oh, Laura, thank you so much. And can I just congratulate you and Poppy for the fantastic work that you do with accelerateHER. It's so important to have a platform like this that's really championing female entrepreneurs and female leaders in general. So thank you. And on that note, speaking of female entrepreneurs and leaders, I can't think of anybody better than the woman that I'm fortunate enough to interview for this closing session. You are the closing act for accelerateHER and London Tech Week. Welcome, Katrina Lake. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
and thank you everybody for joining on this Friday afternoon, evening, time for a cocktail.
Over here, it's time for a cocktail, but it's not time for a cocktail in San Francisco.
True, not quite yet.
Not quite yet. So now, of course, this session is all about leading with purpose. And I know that this is at the core of your business. So can you tell me what leading with purpose means to you and how it translates to your everyday actions as a business leader?
Yeah, I mean, when I started a company, I mean, I was thinking about the business, but I also was thinking about it in terms of, I'd had many jobs before I had started a company. And I was thinking about this as like, what is the workplace that I would love to work at for 10, 20, 30 years? And, I'm coming in now on 10 years of Stitchfix. And that really informed how some of the things that I did in the company. And so there were things like, I always thought that some of the review processes of oh, this person is $10 or 10 pounds better than the person next to them. I always felt like that was super biased and often not fair. And so, so one of the things that we do at Stitchfix is around pay equity and making sure that we actually don't do any individualized pay like that, because we do actually think that it's wrought with bias. And so it's things like that and bringing that into the culture. It's things like, I'm a mother of 2, as was mentioned earlier. And, I always felt like it was, first of all, parenting is something that both parents do. So we have parental leave, not maternity leave or paternity leave. We have an equal parental leave for both parents. And I've taken that twice, and that's super important. And so, for me, first and foremost, purpose really meant how do I create a company that represents the culture that I believe in for the future, that represents a culture where I would want my children to work there and I would feel confident my children could succeed there. And so I think that's one element of purpose. And then I think there's another element of purpose, which is really around the yes, of course, we are all in this to create big, healthy businesses, but the how do we do that? And at Stitch Fix, our kind of 2 pillars around this are around sustainability and equity. And so something like the pay equity practice that we talked about, that's something that is squarely in the equity bucket. Looking at our, looking at our diversity dimensions around gender and ethnicity, that's certainly in our equity bucket. We've done a lot on the gender side. We have a very gender representative board, management team, even in our technology teams. And that's something that we're really proud of. But I think these more and more, these have to be parts of like, not just like the side projects of the business, but it really has to be a core part of the business. And I think more and more people are looking to business leaders for some of this social leadership, and it makes the job harder, but I also think it's what makes the job more rewarding.
Indeed. And I think what's really interesting about what you've done is, one, created this sort of new way of actually having your business operate and the kind of processes you have in place to evaluate talent and making sure that that is as equal as possible. But the other thing I think is really the way Stitchfix as a business completely transformed the way consumers shop. One, how did you come up with the concept? And two, how did you convince others of the merit of the idea? Because it was so out of the box, as it were. And we know it's harder for women to raise funds. What was that whole process like as well?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a good, I guess, a little intro to Stitchfix. And so what we do at Stitchfix is that we, the nugget that I kind of saw was that like, there are so many garments on the planet. I mean, there are millions of things on the planet. And if you think about how do I find the right dress for me, or how do I find the right, denim jeans for me, like those are very hard problems to solve with the internet. And so the idea was like, how do we actually use technology and recommendations to be able to better matchmake, to be able to help people find what they love in a better way? And that was really the premise of Stitchfix, was that we could do that in a new way. And so now today, today as a client, you sign up, you let us know your size and style preferences. We'll have a stylist that will use our recommendations to have you try clothes on at home and try things on, keep what you want, send back what you don't want. So a very, kind of COVID friendly try and buy experience today. And we're starting to expand that so that you can buy directly from our recommendations, and really just capitalizing on that kind of secret sauce of what we're really good at the core. What's interesting is you're right. Like it's radical. We've now sold $5 billion of clothes sight unseen. It would almost be like, if I were like if we were running a dating site, it would be like, oh, you can't see their pictures. You don't get to do any swiping. Just like show up someplace at 7 p.m. and hope that it works out.
It works out.
It does work out. And we've sold $5 billion of clothes that way. And so, what that means is we're now very good at that. The radical nature of the business, and also the fact that it largely catered to women, meant that fundraising was hard. And I do think, honestly, even now as a public company, I still think there are challenges, as the investor community is largely male also, that creates. And so, we raised we raised very little money compared to competitors. We raised less than $100 million to get to, now we have billions of dollars of revenue. It's interesting because a lot of times people will ask me, we are profitable. I think, we've been profitable now for 5-6 years or something like that. We are profitable early on.
What's interesting about you is that you were profitable very early on, and it was clear that there was a business here, but it was still difficult in the way that perhaps it hasn't been for male founders.
Exactly. And I think those are some of the things that were just like deeply frustrating was, firstly, that the business was working. Like I went to business school. I went to Harvard Business School. Like I was in the P&L. Like I knew the business worked, and the business was working, and we were growing. We were growing at crazy rates. Like we grew from being $0 to $1 billion in something like 5-6 years. Like we were growing at a crazy rate, and yet investors, it was so hard to get investors excited about it. And we met with probably 40, 50 investors who said no. Like the only investors who said yes are effectively the ones that were on our cap table. And so and I actually think one of the investors that made it most crystal clear to me was an investor who I really respect, who's at one of the top firms, who was like, he said to me, your business is on fire. Your team is incredible. Like I had the COO of Walmart.com has been working with me for 9 years. Like, we had an incredible team that had lots of experience. And so he was like, your team is incredible. Like the business is on fire. He was like, I love my job. I get to choose 1 or 2 board seats a year. And I want to choose a board seat where I feel really passionate about the business and where I feel like I can add a lot of value as a board member. And he was like, I don't feel like I can get passionate about women's dresses. And I'm just worried that I won't be able to add much to you in terms of like, who your customer is and what you're selling. And like, it was such a depressing moment because like I've made the same decisions, right? Like I'm on the board of Glossier because I love Glossier and I love Emily. And like, I think the brand is amazing. And so I get it. Like you want to join boards that you're passionate about, but then you step back and you look at a landscape where 94% of venture investors are men. And then you think about what are the business they're passionate about? Who are the businesses that are getting funded? What are the company cultures that are getting created?
Yeah,
totally. And so, you know, just, I think that like that to me really highlighted like, wow, like the lack of diversity here, like it is stunning in terms of the impact that it has in terms of who founds the companies of the next generation. And so, you know, I think for me, you know, things have gotten a little bit better, honestly, not enough better. And, you know, at the end of the day, like we desperately, desperately need more diversity in terms of the decision makers, especially decision makers when it comes to things like capital and venture investing, because we employ thousands of people. Uber, Airbnb, all these companies employ thousands of people. And like, you know, these are actually one of the biggest ways that we can create change in the culture of the next generation and create the change that we want to see. And so I feel really passionately that has to change.
I completely agree with you. And actually, it changes when there are more entrepreneurs like you with your story, which then allows those quote unquote male investors to feel more comfortable in taking what they would see as a risk, when all the data shows that actually female entrepreneurs are some of the safest bets, actually.
Exactly. Totally. And you're right. You're exactly right. Like at least we have now incited the capitalists and venture capitalists, because there are many venture capitalists who feel like they missed this. And so, but the thing I would also add though, is that as a public market company, this is still true. Like I think it is still much more, it is still easier for a public market investor to understand Uber, to understand Tesla, to understand the things that feel more accessible to them than it is for them to understand Stitchfix, even though we have a men's offering, right?
So can you tell me what the experience of floating, because as Laura said in her intro, you were the youngest woman to float on the stock market. How amazing. I mean, I'm sure your mum and dad were like, we did all right here. So what was that experience like? And what are the stresses of managing a listed business versus a private company? I mean, it must be a whole different experience.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, listing the company, you know, it was an important moment in the company, and it certainly felt meaningful. And like, you know, I think it's, at the end of the day, it's just like a fundraising event, just like any other. But, you know, I think there's dimensions of like, well, anybody can own the equity. And like, it's interesting. Like, you know, I have had people at the grocery store tell me they bought the stock. I have had like Uber drivers tell me they bought the stock. Like, I mean, it's just like, you know, it's true. Like it's kind of an incredible thing that, you know, kind of every person can feel like they're a shareholder. And so, you know, there's a lot of pride to be taken in that. It was, I mean, the whole listing process was a little bit like, it's a longer story, but, you know, it was a bit of a roller coaster, and we didn't come out with like, we didn't go public at the valuation that we had hoped to be,
that. You had said in an interview that in a way you were undervalued, weren't you, in terms of how the business was delivering?
Yeah, I mean, we were below the expectations that the banks had. And, but what's interesting about that I'll say is that like, it actually really changes your mental state if you suddenly feel like, well, like this isn't going as planned anyway. It actually gives you like a fresh perspective and a fresh attitude on it that I actually think like was, first of all, important for the team, where I think the team really came together. We felt really bonded by that. Like feeling underestimated is actually a pretty powerful force. As you know, totally. Like I think there's like, like being overestimated is, you know, living up to high expectations is harder than like beating lower expectations. And so there was an element that really felt motivating through that. And then it also just really made me feel like this is our own, like, you know what, like we're going to enjoy this day no matter what. And so there was a picture that kind of went viral that was our IPO picture. And in it, I was holding my son, who was, I guess, just over 1 at the time. And like, you know, we did a whole thing where there's a part where I did a little talk, and like I had him up there and I was like feeding him some bread while we were up there, and just like all these things that like I think to be honest, like that was made possible because the IPO didn't go as planned. And I was kind of like, we're going to make the most of this. I'm going to make this my day and like our day. And so, I think it really actually helped us to be able to do the whole thing as our own. And then, being public, everything is more public. I mean, this, June, like, it's just like everything becomes newsworthy, everything. And there's good and bad in that, right? Like, I do think it gives us a bigger platform to do interesting things and for people to see and hear that. And on the flip side, of course, like we're like this, if the stock bounces up and down, there's going to be headlines like Stitchfix stock unravels and, all of this stuff that also comes with the territory. And so I think the very public nature of everything is something that you have to get used to. But I think, at the same time, I think we're grateful that we have this, bigger platform to be able to run a really interesting business on, but also I think to be able to create change in the world.
100%. And I would have thought also encourage more women to start buying stock, because we know that that's something that women don't do enough of. And having female founders gives even a bigger impetus to actually participate in that way.
Totally. Yeah. And even on the investor side, I mean, there actually are quite a few, female fund managers who are super successful. And like, it's been actually like an interesting positive experience to build some of those connections, because I think on the investor side too, it's easy to forget that like they're also, trying to forge the way, and they're also in a very male dominated environment.
Totally. So we actually, oh my goodness, time flies when you're having fun. 5 minutes, I can't believe it. So in terms of, back to the sort of central core of this conversation around leading with purpose, what do you want your legacy to be as an entrepreneur? What is the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning and keeps you driven? And what do you want the business in terms of impact to have as well?
Yeah, I mean, oh gosh, I have so many dreams in this bucket, but I mean, to name a few, I do think, one of the things you just mentioned was around like this idea of like, creating even just the idea that me and this company went public matters. Like I used to be, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but I used to be reticent to be like categorized as a female founder and the youngest female founder. And like, I wanted to just be a founder. Like I felt a little bit of like reticence being categorized that way. And then now I just have such a deep appreciation for how much it really matters of just like, you think about what our children and what little girls and boys are exposed to in terms of like, what different jobs are available to them, what career paths are available to them. And so just this notion of being able to create possibility and to be able to like be an example. Like when I applied to business school, I wrote my essay about Meg Whitman, who at the time had been the CEO of eBay and went on to be the CEO of HP. And well, to be clear, I think Meg is amazing, but I also remember researching and being like, okay, like Meg is the one person I know, like who else is there? And like, there were so few people for me to even
count them on one hand at the time. Yeah.
Quite literally. Yes. Quite literally. Like I made a spreadsheet, which to be clear, I didn't need because it was only like 4 rows. Right. And so I think like, first and foremost, just like, how can I create possibility? How can I be able to like help more people see this path as being available to them? Yeah. And then, I think I have a lot of other aspirations too. I think one big thing is like, I do think as consumers, we need to be voting with our dollars more. And actually like as a business, we need to be voting with our dollars more. Yeah. And so as we have a lot of economic power as Stitchfix in terms of like which vendors we buy from and who is, I guess, benefiting from that. And so like trying to think about how we can actually use kind of the economic power that we have to be able to create greater diversity and equality. Like that's something that I care really passionately about. And then around building diverse teams, like Stitch Fix has always had a quite diverse team. Like we've been diverse across, frankly, across ethnicity lines as well, and gender for sure. And like, I think there's a lot of people who believe in the abstract, believe that diverse teams are possible, but there aren't a lot of examples of living, breathing, publicly traded companies that look like a diverse team. Yeah. And so, so I think that's another area that we can really create change. But, I think as an entrepreneur, you have all these big dreams about all the things you can change. And, I think I'll be very lucky if we get to create impact in just a handful of those. But it's, I think it's part of what makes this super rewarding. And to answer your question of what keeps me going and keeps me excited and, gets me here.
It gets you here. Well, I have to say, without question, you've done it. And what you are, as I said earlier, is an example of what's possible and an example of what we just want to see become normal, where we're just seeing fantastic entrepreneurs, regardless of gender, doing phenomenal things. But while it isn't the norm, we need these examples to help normalize things. So thank you for that, Katrina. And we look forward to welcoming you to the UK again when you can actually travel.
I can't wait. I'm very excited. I used to come every May, so hopefully next May, maybe by then. Hopefully.
Well, hopefully next May we'll be able to do this in person at accelerateHER. So yeah, we'll close it again, but in person, hopefully.
Looking forward to it. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, June and Katrina, and absolutely to next year accelerateHER in person. What an incredibly energizing session to end the day on and to end accelerateHER and London Tech Week. Thank you to all the people that have tuned in and to both of you for just a brilliant, brilliant session.
Thanks, Laura. See you, Katrina.
Thank you.